Dan Proft here. This is who we should be talking about today, not Bad Bunny, to be honest with you. Brad Arnold, the front man for Three Doors Down, passed away from kidney cancer, 47 years old. A great artist, the good old boys from Mississippi. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. And you remember we played the clip when he announced his diagnosis last May. And he was a believer. And just a good dude. These are the sorts of artists that deserve more profile. Bad Bunny deserving less. But I digress. We were talking about the meme controversy. And as I said at the close of the last segment, obfuscates from the underlying issue, which is election integrity, which is front and center right now as the press is on to pass the SAVE Act in the Senate and to eliminate the zombie filibuster in furtherance of passing it out of the Senate and to the president's desk so that we have things like voter ID. And very much like on immigration, the left is just a mess on this issue, right? Chuck Schumer's Jim Crow 2.0 is a no sale. I mean, John Fetterman, the Democrat from Pennsylvania.
And now, me as a Democrat, I do not believe that it's unreasonable or to show ID just to vote. And I remind everybody that less than a year ago in Wisconsin, they added that to the Constitution by a 63%, passing to put that in the Constitution that you have to show ID to vote. And they also elected a very, very liberal justice into their Supreme Court. So it's not a radical idea for regular Americans to show your ID to vote. And it's absolutely, those things are not Jim Crow or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Dana Bash tried to pin the minority leader in the House, the ill-equipped Hakeem Jeffries, down on this issue. Not that hard. But, this question keeps getting asked of Democrats. 71% of Democrats support requiring voter ID in order to vote. So they're all proponents of Jim Crow 2.0 as well. Here, listen to Hakeem Jeffries attempt to sidestep it, and then contradict himself.
For example, but requiring basic ID in order to vote is really popular. A Pew poll from a few months ago showed 83% of Americans, including 71% of your fellow Democrats, support requiring an ID to vote. Why are they wrong?
I haven't said that they're wrong. We know that states are the ones who are empowered to conduct elections, and every state should be allowed to decide the best way to proceed to ensure that there's a free and fair election. Here in New York, there are, in fact, voter identification requirements. The question is that what Republicans are trying to do is to engage in clear and blatant voter suppression. They know that if there's a free and fair election in November, they're going to lose.
So I don't understand. You're not saying they're wrong to require voter ID. It should be decided at the state level. But because the Republicans want voter ID, they're attempting to suppress the vote. That makes no sense. That was not Dana Bash's follow-up. You won't be surprised to learn. For more on this, in addition to the state of affairs in Fulton County after that FBI raid last week, pleased to be joined again by Cleta Mitchell, who is a renowned election attorney and founder of the Election Integrity Network. Cleta, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Before we get to Fulton County, I just wanted to get your take on this. I guess it's controversial between at least Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. It is. I don't know about much of the rest of the country when it comes to the SAVE Act and voter ID.
Well, you're exactly right. There's absolutely there's no controversy among the American people. I don't care what demographic you look at. I don't care what poll you look at. But there is overwhelming support for two principles. One, that people should prove that they're citizens before they're allowed to register to vote. And two, that people should show an ID when they cast a ballot. So and for all kinds of voting, if you're voting by mail, that you have to send a photocopy of your photo ID. If you're voting in person, you have to bring your ID to the polls. And those are, depending on the poll you look at, it's 85%, 89%. So I've seen 91% support for both of those issues. I mean, this is not controversial among the American people. But the problem in America that we have today is that the people are not divided. There are any number of 80, 90% issues that the people agree on in the media, in left-wing media, and academia, et cetera, Hollywood. They comprise that tiny percentage of Americans who disagree with all the rest of us, and that's what we're up against.
I think the Babylon Bee had the best commentary on it. They wrote that Schumer and Jeffries are willing to compromise on registration and allow for death certificates to count as the basis to register to vote. So not so much birth certificates, but yeah, death certificates will do. Let's turn to Fulton County and give us, the basis. There's a lot of this is shrouded in sort of confusion and misinformation. Give us the basis for the FBI raid. You were there. You were on the call with Raffensperger, as we've talked about many times, and that also is the subject of great misinformation. But let's start with the FBI raid.
Well, here's the situation in Fulton County and in Georgia. That election was a mess. And it is impossible to know who actually won Georgia because the laws were completely disregarded both at the state level by the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, and his team, as well as in Fulton County. So let me just set the stage just a little bit so people can have an understanding. On November the 4th, the day after the election in 2020, now this is now 12 hours after the close of the polls in Georgia the night before. And remember, all absentee ballots, all in-person voting, all ballots have to be in before the close of the polls on Election Day. 12 hours later, the Secretary of State gets on the Today Show, and he says the President Trump is ahead by over 100,000 votes, and there are only 94,000 ballots left to count. That was 12 hours after the polls closed on Election Day, 12 hours later. Somehow, between that 7 a.m. appearance and when they, quote, certified the first the machine tabulation, it wasn't 94,000 ballots. It turned out to be 300,000. Half of those came from Fulton County, 148,000 more ballots than they had said that they had the night before. So the thing that then you start looking at is, okay, well, gosh, where did those extra 148,000 ballots come from in Fulton County? And the fact of the matter is, nobody knows, because there were over 22,000 ballots that absentee ballots, more ballots than voters recorded as having cast an absentee ballot in Fulton County. So these are fictitious ballots. And there are the poll tapes. Every tabulator is supposed to have a tape that shows a 0 ballots at the beginning. That's required by law. And that has to be on the tape. It has to have a serial number of the tabulator, and it has to have the location where that tabulator was, via what polling location. And then it is supposed to have a closing tape that shows how many ballots that tabulator tabulated. And then that is supposed to be signed by the poll manager and witnessed by 2 poll workers. There is not a single tabulator tape in Fulton County that has all of those elements. You have only 9 that were signed. You have 315,000 votes that were tabulated. Tabulators where the tabulator tape is not signed by anyone. So it's impossible to trace or to audit those ballots and those votes. And so, I mean, I could give you this 263-page report was published 2 weeks ago by a group of researchers. Kevin Moncla is the key researcher. It's at if people want to look at that whole report, he has published it on his X account. So it's at Kevin Moncla, Moncla. And I took that and tried to just condense it into digestible bullet points so people could understand the vast disparity between what is supposed to be in the records and what is not in the records, to show how people clearly fabricated the hand recount that's supposed to confirm the machine tabulation, where people clearly just wrote on the audit report. It's is a batch report, so you have 100 ballots in a batch. They're supposed to count those ballots, then wrap a little report around it and say, here's the total. And they have in the 263-page report screenshots of 3 different batch reports. One of them shows Biden getting 100 votes and nobody else getting any, 100 votes in another, 150 in another, which is interesting because it's only supposed to have 100 votes. And then when they actually went back and looked at the ballots within that batch, that isn't at all it's not at all what those numbers, those falsified numbers, are still included in the certified number of votes. And there are 7,000 of those. Now, remember, the margin between President Trump and Joe Biden was only 11,779. So in that one anomaly alone, you have almost 7,000 fictitious votes. They just made them up and put them on the ballot audit report and then the batch audit report. It's insane.
It's a miraculous manipulation of votes. I mean, on the order of the fishes and loaves. It's biblical.
Yes, it is.
I just want to focus on something you said. 148,319 absentee ballots were counted in Fulton County. Only 125,784 voters are recorded as casting an absentee ballot for a spread of about 23,000 votes. And as you said, the spread was less than 12,000 statewide in 2020. Does Raffensperger or any Fulton County officials, I mean, I see the one Fulton County board member all over all the left-wing cable shows, decrying Trump and so on and so forth. But I never hear Raffensperger or any Fulton County official getting into the specifics of explaining these disparities that you're highlighting.
They never do. They never have. And in fact, that was the big argument that we're having with Raffensperger, which was the reason that President Trump wanted to have do a phone call with him. Right. And all Raffensperger will ever say is, your data is wrong. Okay, show us where we're wrong. And we kept saying that to him. We're saying that today. You show us where we're wrong. These people the people who published this report that I'm talking about, Kevin Moncla and that group of volunteers, they have filed over a dozen complaints with the state election board since 2020, detailing each of these different issues over and over. And the state election board, because the governor has refused to allow them to be funded to have their own investigators or their own attorney, they have to refer things to the Secretary of State's office. The Secretary of State's office refuses to investigate, saying, well, we can't investigate because that would be like investigating ourselves. Yes, that's right. That's why the legislature separated the state election board from the Secretary of State. But the governor has line item vetoed the money the legislature has tried to give to the state election board to be able to independently investigate and determine these issues. So there's been a huge cover-up by the Governor Kent, by Raffensperger, by the Attorney General, Chris Carr. It's awful. Chris Carr, the Attorney General, one of these complaints dealing with at least one of these anomalies was not investigated by the Secretary of State. So the State Election Board referred it to the Attorney General and asked the Attorney General to investigate. Do you know what his investigation consisted of? He went to Fulton County and brought back a signed piece of paper saying, "Oh, they're sorry. They promised not to do that again."
What is it?
Investigations.
But here's the thing, so Kemp, Carr, and Raffensperger are all Republicans. But what is their problem? Why won't they provide? What is your intuition in terms of why won't they provide a detailed response to this? And why, if they don't have a detailed response, would they not be joining the chorus to say Fulton County needs to explain what happened?
Because they decided early on during that whole debacle that they did not want to have to answer any questions about it. I don't know. I'll tell you, I spent many, many hours and weeks and months and years trying to figure out the answer to that very question. And I've never been able to understand it, other than they knew that it was a mess and they just wanted to sweep it under the rug. I don't know what their problem is. And they just literally just refused to do anything to help.
Maybe it was just too hot to handle. They just didn't want it. They didn't want to spend the political capital.
And I don't understand that, because honestly, I think that it's harmed all three of them in terms of their future political futures.
Yeah.
Chris Carr and Ravensburger are both running for governor. Brian Kemp thinks he's going to be president. I've got news for him.
Mm-hmm. What do you have any optimism that the FBI will get to a resolution to this? Will get the information necessary to substantiate or to to delineate the malfeasance here? Or is it just it's so difficult to gather the physical evidence at this stage that we'll never really know?
Well, that's a good question. We don't know precisely what's in the records. There was an order issued, believe it or not, on January 6th of 2021. A group of citizens filed a lawsuit in December of 2020 to go through and have access to all the materials and the ballots, to order that they be preserved until after the 22-month period required under federal law and state law for preserving election records. So they filed a lawsuit in December of 2020, and that on January 6th of 2021, the judge issued a protective order and granted their request that none of the materials in Fulton County were to be discarded. Now, what we know is that there were hundreds of thousands of ballot images that were deleted deliberately. There were, I'm not a techie, but there's a certain thing called a SHA file, which is like a fingerprint that is a unique identifier for each ballot. There are hundreds of thousands of those that are missing from the absentee ballots. So that is what authenticates that scanned and give and assign this unique identifier, this SHA image. Those are missing. I think there are nearly 400,000 of those that are missing from Fulton County. We hope that the ballot envelopes, the absentee ballot envelopes, we hope that those are in the records that are preserved. We don't know that, but they're supposed to have been retained. But that would also give us a pretty good idea, because remember, under Georgia law, you can't hand deliver an absentee ballot. You can. They allowed drop boxes. That was also something that wasn't under the law then, but Ravensburger still allowed it. But still, those have to be folded and put in an envelope. And we kept hearing reports of what they called pristine ballots that were supposedly absentee ballots, but which had never been folded. And our volunteers kept saying, now, how is that possible? Because every absentee ballot has to come in an envelope. The envelope has to be authenticated. That was the signature matching that also didn't happen. We hope that there are enough materials that are preserved to be able to answer these questions.
Cleta Mitchell, we appreciate the explainer as always. Thank you for this. Renowned election attorney, founder of the Election Integrity Network. Cleta, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Cleta joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer, coming up at 7:07. Our weekly conversation with Steve and Bucci. We'll start at the borders, tackle the important